Hello.
Hello.
Hey, folks.
Hello.
Hey everyone.
Hey.
I think we are. Oh, I think Alex may be coming. Maybe we'll give it a minute for Alex. Does anyone know how the Google Docs that are on the agenda items get created? I was going to try to take some notes.
Someone just creates them. But normally what we do now is like a continual notes system. So you can just open the last one and just add it to the top of that.
Right. I'll try to grab that and share it in chat just a second.
I've got it here. I'll paste it through.
One step behind you. Well, maybe we can go ahead and get started. Benji, I don't know, maybe if you want to kick us off with just a little sharing a little bit about how you've been thinking about it so far. And I think one option would be we could just have an open discussion. Another option we could sort of take some time individually to just, maybe take 5 or 10 minutes individually to just see if we can generate a bunch of ideas and then use that as input for a second discussion. But maybe Benji, you can kick us off with just how you've been thinking about it so far.
Sure. So the way that I see it is we effectively are going from having two types, a base type and a non-nullable type, to having three, where the new type is kind of in the middle. And I'm keen to not change the meanings or the syntax for the outside ones because they already have meanings and they're well understood and they've been documented for like 9 years now whilst GraphQL's been public. So the way I see it, our problem is we need to come up with a syntax that we're happy with for that bit in the middle. And when it comes to syntax in GraphQL, we can add things before, we can add things after, and we can do both. But we must be careful not to conflict with other parts of the syntax. So curly braces, for example, would likely be a problem, or colons. But I think it's unlikely we would want to use those particular symbols. Currently, we use the bang symbol, obviously, for non-null, and we use the square bracket symbol for, or symbols for lists. And I kind of see the semantic non-null as it's a non-null with a caveat. It's a non-null except if an error happens. So originally, when I first proposed it, it was an asterisk. It's like a string, sort of, string non-nullable unless there's an error. Actually quite like the idea that there should be a bang in it because it is non-null except. So like a bang asterisk isn't the end of the world. But one critical thing that I think we need to keep in mind is the proposal here is that this would be, I don't personally think that this will be the default type. I think the default type will remain the nullable type, but I think it will be preferred in most places over the non-nullable, because it allows the handling of the errors. So you'd only use the non-null on things that will definitely never error, like the ID field. You would never expect that to error. And if it has errored, everything else is kind of useless anyway. So like blowing it up at that point is fine. So yeah, it needs to be something that we're happy typing and seeing a lot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a really good, like, an important thing to ground our discussion is like, we expect, and I think there's two pieces to it. One, we expect it to be very common. And two, we expect it to be preferable to the presumably more obvious bang in most cases where people are currently using bang. I think you're right that there will still be a place for the existing bang, but that it's likely that currently places where people are like, I don't want to deal with this nullability, where they're currently using bang, they really ought to be using this semantic non-null.
I think one thing that's maybe worth, like, obviously, like, there's like tons of options, but I think, like, is it worth trying to nail down whether or not we think it's feasible to make this character in front of the type as opposed to behind the type? My concern with like having it in front is that it's like, if you already have a situation where you can have a character at the end or not, then having a character in the front, kind of like, what does it mean? Like if, say, it's like the tilde, for example, right? It's like, if you put a tilde in front and there's no bang at the end, what does that mean? If you put a tilde in the front and there is a bang at the end, what does that mean? Like, it feels like you're kind of like you're opening up too many like combinations of like invalid syntax if we support like both prefixing and postfixing. So like, does anyone want to disagree about that, I guess? Or like, can we basically say like we probably shouldn't use a prefix character to try to see if we can like hone in on some sort of like base rule of guidelines here?
I personally have no problem with using a prefix character. We already do that with lists.
But it's symmetrical with list, right? It's bracketed as a prefix and as a suffix.
Yeah, I think maybe using a prefix only might not be desirable, but I wouldn't rule it out as a blanket rule. I think it would have to be pretty good to pass that criteria. But yeah, at this point, I think keep it open, see what we get to.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
probably good to like raise what are the trade-offs of various decisions, but maybe it would be good to start with just like, let's have some like, there are no bad ideas time to just like bring up a bunch of stuff, and then we can come up with some criteria by which we want to evaluate them sort of as a secondary pass. I think that feels like a good model. Benji, you did a ton of brainstorming in this. Just do you feel like there's, would it be wise for us to take 5 minutes right now and just each of us stare at our keyboards and see if we can come up with more things? Or do you think you feel like you've sort of already exhausted the space here, and it would be worth, just sort of discussing what's here?
So I've added a few more things to this, only just now, in fact.
Okay.
So the tilde bang, for example, isn't one that I came up with myself. I came up with tilde something bang, but someone else said, oh, I thought you meant the tilde and bang next to each other. So I think there's definitely worth people coming up with other combinations. I mean, this is, at the end of the day, it's mostly an aesthetic decision. So what might end up looking good we're not sure of yet. Another thing that I would say is turn off syntax highlighting. Because if you don't do that, it's going to come up in red or whatever, and your brain is gonna say, no, that doesn't look right.
Well, but yeah, let's take the next 5 minutes and we'll each of us just stare at our keyboards a little bit and see and maybe look at Benji's list for inspiration, and see if there's anything else we can think of. All right, just a few more seconds. All right. Um, was there anyone who sort of came up with something entirely novel that hadn't been captured in any of Benji's notes or unclear? And again, no bad ideas. This is safe space. I wasn't too either. Unfortunately, Benji, you were very exhaustive.
I think the only one that's not on the gist that I think Benji actually came up with himself was like the double exclamation point.
Oh man.
That isn't. Unless I missed it, I don't think that's part of the gist. Just want to make sure that was, since that was brought up in Discord.
Yeah, I just added that one myself during that time as well. There's also another one which I came up with just now, which was a dash bang. And I'm thinking like in TypeScript, there are sometimes times where you would use a minus to be like a modifier of an existing symbol. So it's not without precedent to see those symbols together. I put some pluses in there. They didn't seem that exciting. I've added the symbol, the section marker symbol, which of course is on most keyboards, but yeah, it looks too much like a letter. It's too confusing, I think, next to it. But as a semantic thing that looks like an S is tempting, but no, I don't think that will work. I also tried pipe symbols as like surrounding the thing, inspired by like the flow exact object syntax. But again, it just looks like too many symbols next to each other. So I think the only one that came out of that extra 5 minutes for me is the dash bang or the double bang as well, actually.
Yeah. Maybe another good thing to do would be like as you all thought, I think Ernie had a good like question, like, okay, what are some criteria we can use to evaluate these? Like, can we agree that there's a certain cost associated with certain choices? I would love to hear like what are some things that people found themselves noticing while looking at these things, like, oh, that won't work because, or like that would be a problem because, or like, oh, I like the fact that this does, has this property.
The only one that like stuck out to me was like the greater than less than signs, which are usually meant to like for like generics and types, right? And like TypeScript doesn't have that, GraphQL doesn't have that, but like could it in the future,
Yeah.
right? And so like that feels like that would probably be a non-starter as far as like we'd be really sad if we at some point decided that we wanted generics in GraphQL and then it's like, oh, but we've already taken the greater than less than signs because I think that's like such a universally used, I mean, maybe not universally, but like I think most people are very used to the brackets being the generic type. And so that I don't think that precludes us anything, but I think that like locks off too much future potential for it to be like a reasonable choice.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. There is the preserve option value guiding principle in the GraphQL spec, and I think the triangular brackets would have to have a very high bar to pass that.
And then the only other one that I noticed that was kind of in that same vein is like the parens, just because the parens list thing is so gnarly. It's like paren bracket thing like it's just kind of like, especially with the nested one. Like, I mean, I'm glad you like put all the use cases in there, Benji, because it is like you see that and it's like, oh, it's not that bad on one thing, and then you would go to like the nested stuff and it's like, oh, that's where it's like there's no way people will like or like, I mean, it would just be very difficult, I think, for people to do like get that correct, and it's just like hard to read when you get to the nested stuff.
Yeah, one that I haven't put in amongst these, which I probably should have done, would be a non-nullable list of semantically non-nullable things, or a semantically non-nullable list of non-nullable things, because there's an interesting how the symbols interact in that situation. It's one of the reasons why I'm less keen on the exclamation mark prefix than I was previously.
Are alt symbols fully out of the question? Like upside down question mark, upside down exclamation point. They're the same number of keystrokes as exclamation point and question mark are already. I don't know if
That
they're
is
in the
a
cross
great
keyboards, though.
question.
Like non-ASCII. Is that your sort of the
Yeah,
question?
I guess. I don't know. Is that ASCII?
I'd actually have to look it up in an ASCII table.
Yeah.
Maybe one thing we can say is that like non-ASCII characters or alt characters do come at a higher cost.
Yeah, they definitely do. Yeah, they're not in an ASCII table.
And specifically has to be printable, I suppose, would be the other restriction. You can't put the delete character at the end of. So just narrow it further than ASCII. Let's.
What's an extended ASCII table? I see that one listed on ASCIItable.com.
That's the higher order ASCII codes, I think, 128 plus, which you can't use if you're using UTF-8 and so on, because they use the prefix.
These go up to 120 or yeah.
Where the first bit of the byte is the 1, that's where you opt into the Unicode stuff.
Yeah, my gut is just like we really shouldn't. Like I don't know if there's any precedence for that in languages.
Like
maybe we need to rethink best practices, but
but it's kind of hard to type, right? I mean, depends on your keyboard layout, but I think there's lots of layouts where you don't have these characters. So
yeah, but to be fair, that's also true of the hash symbol on many keyboards, especially in
Really?
British Mac keyboards. Yeah, they don't have a hash. So for us, it's Alt-3. So I don't think that's a good enough reason to rule out a symbol. Hash is used everywhere.
Interesting.
But yeah, you shouldn't be punching in like Alt 0197 or whatever.
Yeah. On American keyboards, this is just Alt 1 and Alt / I think, for a question mark. What is it on British? Does it exist?
Sorry, for the upside down question mark, or
yeah. Or maybe it's Alt Shift /.
Oh yeah, Alt Shift / is working for me. It's the right hand Alt though, specifically.
Oh really?
Yeah. Which I guess is the Alt GR or whatever it is.
It's icky then. Never mind.
One thing I caught myself.
To be fair, I'm on Linux, so
we'll just discard everything you've ever said. Martin, you have an excellent suggestion with some sure litigation in our future. one thing I caught myself thinking as I was reading through these options was that it felt uh, much clearer to understand the ones that qualified the bang rather than ones that tried to build up a new non-nullable semantic on top of the base type. And obviously that then means two characters instead of one, but I felt like when I looked at the ones that were, something qualifying the bang, I was like, oh, I think I could sort of intuit what that would mean. Whereas the other ones, I was like, I would have to look that up, I guess. And I guess that does include the alternate positional, the prefixed bang. I think also falls somewhere in that camp. But yeah, that was just one observation I had.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I find myself preferring, for example, the exclamation mark asterisk over just the asterisk on its own.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with that. And following that thought, the asterisk and the tilde, they make sense as a, because they usually used as a like something like to change slightly the meaning of something else.
Agreed. So the other one is bang bang, which I actually find quite interesting. It's challenging because, like, from a written English point of view, you don't want to see too many exclamation marks in a row. Like that person's overexcited. But from this point of view, you've got the exclamation mark that means non-nullable, but an extra one is like, hang on, actually, there's a warning here. Like this is something that is expected to throw an error potentially. Like this is a position where an error may happen. And exclamation mark is often used in programming to indicate that this is a dangerous operation. So associating that extra exclamation mark with an error kind of does make sense to me. What I'm looking at it at the moment is with a red bang and a black bang next to each other because I'm looking at it through GitHub. But
that's actually kind of nice how it shows it that way, that it's like you have like two distinct types of exclamation points side by side.
Yeah.
Composing together.
So I wonder whether the aesthetic of just two exclamation marks next to each other is too much. Because if it wasn't for that preconceived written English prose interpretation, I think it would actually be one of my favorites.
One thing I'm not a fan of about the double exclamation mark is that, in a way, the single one means it's non-nullable, and if you put two of them, it's like it's even more non-nullable, which is kind of the opposite of what we want to say.
Yeah, that is gone.
I was gonna say I had the same reaction, which is like you said, the double exclamation sort of indicates like this is even more like you should proceed with more caution here, but it's the inverse, right? Like the true non-null is the more dangerous, the more like you should be careful here variant.
That's an interesting thing to say, because I think what you said is true from the point of view of the schema author. But if we assume that we're in this new world and both symbols exist and are being used widely and correctly, then as a consumer, you would actually not worry about the exclamation mark, because that's never going to be null. It's never going to be an error because it's going to blow up and blow anything else up if it were to fail. So you just know that that's going to be fine. Whereas the double exclamation mark is something you have to pay more attention to, because it might be present and null in the case that it is an error. So from a client perspective, you need more caution with the double bang. From a server perspective, you need to be real certain that that singular bang is what you mean.
That actually, though, makes me go back to the tilde or asterisk bang, because it is like it's non-null, but you know, read the fine print. There's something else going on here. You can't just assume. Um, but yeah, that is an interesting observation that the as a yeah, I guess the assumption is right. You may have two different types of clients which do error handling and clients which do not. And as if you assume a world where most clients are error handling by default, like a future world, um, then maybe the concern is the opposite, right? Like, oh, I don't need to worry about this. This is never going to be null for me as a consumer, which is really the main consumer we care about, not framework authors or client authors. But you're right. If you have a non-error handling client, then you do have to proceed with more caution.
And I think keeping in mind the GraphQL is intended for the clients. So I think in these debates, they should win generally. Their perspective should win. And we do want to keep GraphQL open to people that aren't using complex clients as well. Because in an error handling client, you wouldn't be too worried about either of them, right? Neither of them's more scary than the other.
Just one thing I did happen to notice was the tilde bang does kind of roll off the fingers nicely, just where they are on my keyboard at least. I don't know if that's how.
Oh, is your tilde at the top left?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite common. Mine's not. I'm using English, a GB Mac keyboard on Linux. So
It's like the Vim motion keys are like a side effect of the keyboard that that like the author have, or like the predecessor to Vim's author happen to have arrows on those keys.
yeah, that's why it's offset by one.
I liked the bang asterisk as well. I think it it just like it reads like it makes sense. It's non-null, but you know. I also liked the parentheses for the same reason. Like it's non-null, but we're capturing errors. Like they're contained. Um, Written down, it's a little messy looking, but I think it means what it looks like.
Yeah, that's a really interesting interpretation of what the symbols mean for the parenthesis. I like it.
This was the one that was parenthesis wrapping around the exclamation marked version.
Yeah.
Oh, was that in there too?
Yeah, there's two, line 50 and line 57 define two different types. The one in line, 52, I guess, is just wrapped with parenthesis. And the one on line 59 is actually three symbols, an open parenthesis, your type, then a bang and close parenthesis. So it is like non-nullable and then, as you say, contained.
Yeah, I guess I would either would work. The downside to parentheses on their own, I suppose, is that parentheses normally don't like they're they don't really change um like the underlying value of what they wrap. They're just sort of, I don't know. Let me think this through. I'll get back to you on this one.
Yeah,
So just
parentheses also have the preserve option value challenge, right? That's a very powerful symbol.
that is true. And especially, I think it's going to be interesting when you see it used inside of arguments, because they're already parenthesized. But I'm kind of less worried about it from a type perspective than I am about the triangular brackets.
Yeah.
So just an interesting tidbit is when I first was writing up the proposal for this, the semantic non-null type wasn't a type wrapper like the non-null type. It was another layer. So effectively, it was an error boundary around a non-null. So it would have been a non-null and then with another symbol around it. So the parenthesis around the non-null fitted into that world. Since then, I realized that a easier way to form it is effectively to just make it an alternative to non-null rather than a wrapper around it. But I think both interpretations are valid. You can think of it as a non-null with then an error boundary around it that catches that null. So representing that concept in the symbols could well be valid. So in general, I think that everyone is leaning towards containing an exclamation mark. Does that seem accurate for everyone here?
Yeah, or qualifying it in some way.
Yeah, so I think it's going to have at least one exclamation mark, wherever that may be, probably at the end, or near the end. And then another symbol.
Yeah, I think I like leaving the exclamation mark just in there just because I think that I mean, we're all down to like low level reasoning here, I think, but like it kind of makes like the migration of an existing schema a little bit easier where you don't have to like swap out characters, you're just adding, it's like purely an additive thing. So it's like, okay, I go all through all my schema. If I'm to like wholesale my schema and say like, great, I have all these required fields, I'm going to start making them all semantically non-null. It's like, okay, it's like you add one thing as opposed to like having to like replace it with something else.
Standard use case is more going to be the opposite though, like you take nullable and you make them semantically non-null. So it's going to be adding two characters.
Yeah, the migration from exclamation point to semantic non-null is that's a breaking change for your clients.
Yes.
Whereas going the other way, if you have sort of followed best practices and then going, okay, now we're gonna like be more specific here that we're going from null to semantic non-null, that's a non-breaking change because it's constricting the type.
But I think that it is still a good point. Like I definitely agree. Going from nullable to semantic non-nullable is non-breaking. Going from non-nullable to semantic non-nullable is a breaking change technically. But I think there are people that have a lot of non-nulls in their schemas that probably should be using semantic non-nulls instead. So that is definitely a breaking change, but it is one that I think people will probably be making when this comes out.
So then just to capture the within that area, the options that we have that like are most promising are the bang or the bang asterisk, the tilde bang, and
bang carrot and bang bang.
Bang carrot, bang bang.
I quite like the minus bang as well, to be honest.
Do we want? I like Alex, your point about the sort of how the parentheses of one does sort of give an elegant sort of mental model, almost like a visualization of of how that's going to work. It does feel like 3 characters is maybe just that's going to be too much, unless we want to like rethink everything as like we're going to add a new thing, which is error boundaries in the schema. And there's a separate syntax for that. Maybe it would be worth taking some time for one or two of us to go think about that as like an entirely different approach. But maybe for the purposes of this discussion, I'm tempted to say we can discard that option. Given these options, my temptation is to like the ones that make the most sense linguistically seem to win out. The ones that have like the clear like the bang carrot or carrot bang carrot. Oh, I see, or carrot, yeah. Like in my experience, like I see carrot as like a secondary asterisk, right? Like once you've used up your asterisk, you're like, okay, now I'm going down the thing. I'm going to have like, these secondary, tertiary, qualifying annotations. And so I think to me that feels like a lesser option. Curious what other people think. If there are other things that make it more desirable, like if we had to rank these, maybe.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like maybe we should do like a ranked choice vote.
Well,
I
I
think
think it's good. I think I was going to say a vote might be helpful, but I think it might be worth just going through like what are how would we evaluate them? Like what criteria would we be using? Is it just purely aesthetic? Do we have some sort of grounding for the evaluation?
The other, like just as a last minute, the other one we didn't put on there, which I think is like probably in the top of the running, is still the
Interrobang.
Yeah, Benji, we got it. Like that one should certainly like still be on the that one should probably still be in like the first cut, I think, like options.
I would type it, but I don't know how, which is maybe not a good
Oh, just bang question mark.
Yeah, right.
We're
not the actual interrobang symbol.
Okay.
That's not ASCII.
I mean, I think the interrobang emoji really should be up here somewhere.
Yeah. Is that character on your keyboard, Benji? Do you have?
No, I'm pretty sure there's a shortcut for it, but no.
Maybe if we make a bold choice here, keyboard designers in the future will be like, we really got to have a key for that interrobang emoji for all those GraphQL schema authors. Giant market.
So the interesting thing with interrobang, and with a number of these combinations actually, is the order that you can define it in is you can do it either way for most symbols. With interrobang itself, it is valid in both orders, and you would still call both of them an interrobang. But an interrobang would traditionally be a question mark, exclamation mark. Whereas to me, I see that for GraphQL, it would actually be an exclamation mark, question mark, because it's effectively a non-null with then this error boundary wrapper. And I kind of see that for each of the symbols. So this is a really like weak opinion. But generally, I would prefer something that takes the type with a bang and then puts a symbol outside of that, either on the right or on the left or both, rather than one that puts a symbol inside between the type and the bang. But again, that's like incredibly weak. It's just a very slight preference. And Jordan, you asked about the asterisk versus the caret. In Markdown, typically you would use the caret to do a footnote, rather than an asterisk, which of course means like bold or whatever. Mm-hmm. Also, aesthetically, I find the exclamation mark caret to be less visually noisy than exclamation mark asterisk. That asterisk is really bold, I think, compared to the caret, which is far fewer pixels.
But it's especially true in monospace fonts too. I think that in I'm looking at it in like the Google Doc, it's like the bang exclamation like asterisk like looks reasonable, but like in the gist, it's like center aligned, like as opposed to like a kind of a super, which actually like doesn't make it look as good. I agree kind of with that, but I don't know.
Does anyone feel particularly strongly for or against the bang bang or the interrobang?
I feel pretty strongly against the interrobang. I think one, we don't have a meaning yet for question mark on its own. That seems like something we may eventually want to have, or like maybe only in the query text, but something. And so it sort of feels like we're for the other ones, they seem more obviously like, oh, we're like qualifying the exclamation point. The interrobang feels like I'm composing two different things just because question mark has such a like a legacy of being a like a type its own standalone thing. And so I think that's where it starts to get me, is like now it feels like we're composing, and then you get into the question of order, and it's like, wait, which of these is valid? Whereas the like bang star or tilde bang feel like they have like a more obvious order, like, oh yeah, this is the one that makes sense in English. And therefore, like I know intuitively which order is correct. Um, I would rather not have a setup where it's like either works and like, we have to just to parse both ways. That seems like you would want something that's just like, there's one way to do it. Otherwise you're gonna end up with a lint rule saying we want to be consistent. And like, I don't know how you would memorize like which one it's supposed to be.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
Um, Is there anyone who feels strongly against the tilde bang? Like what's the best argument against the tilde bang? That one seems the like, I haven't yet maybe heard a like, yeah, but for that one.
I think the only thing I brought up is like, which is I think fairly weak, is like that's sort of like the not operator, like the binary not. And so like there is the potential of like that having the wrong connotation of sort of like the inverse of what the character following it means. I don't think that's like super strong. I mean, I think like in my opinion, I think like bang asterisk or tilde asterisk are like probably the two top choices. But that was the only like minor thing I brought up, is just like what that means. Like in JavaScript, if you like do tilde 0, it turns into 1.
Right.
And so there's like I don't know. I don't know how people know that. I guess that feels like that's a pretty obscure. People are doing a lot of binary operations in a lot of languages these days, especially probably around GraphQL stuff. But that was the only thing I mentioned about it.
What's the like the semantic interpretation of tilde that we're using as like inspiration here? Like
So if you're like representing numbers somewhere and you're like, you want to indicate that they're sort of approximate, you might prefix it with a tilde.
oh, okay, got it. Yeah.
It's roughly non-nullable.
Right.
It's approximately non-nullable.
That's actually where it comes from. It's the
Got it. Okay, thanks. That makes sense.
So yeah, I feel like the tilde bang and bang star are the sort of the top two. And like comparing those two, I think the visual weight of the tilde one is a little bit nicer. The typability is a little bit nicer. I mean, that's very marginal and only on my keyboard, so or coincidentally on my keyboard.
I definitely think that I prefer the bang caret over the bang asterisk. But again, it's mostly because the asterisk in monospace font is just huge.
So then does that also weight tilde bang above bang star, bang asterisk for you?
I like tilde bang. It's all right. But again, there's that ever so slight weighting that I want the symbol to be after the bang, not before it. But that again, that's very, very slight. So I'd be, especially now that it's specified as an alternative to non-null, I'm perfectly happy for it to go before. So yeah, I think they all weigh very similarly for me.
In terms of just like in terms of lexing, wouldn't it be preferable to have the symbol ahead, or does it not matter?
Yeah, I think it probably would, because you'd have to do a look ahead with the bang caret. You'd have to say that, and the next character is not
Yeah.
a caret. But honestly, we've got that in various other places anyway, so I don't think it's the end of the world. And also, I don't think we'd accept a space between them or any ignored character. Like it couldn't be exclamation mark space caret. Or comma, because of course comma's ignored.
Any other thoughts about the bang caret? Anyone prefer bang caret over tilde bang?
There's a pronunciation aspect of it, like tilde bang is easy to pronounce. Bang caret, we need to find a word for it.
Yeah, also, I'm not 100% sure that caret is the right name for that symbol.
I think
Like you might also think of it as like circumflex or a whole bunch of other things.
That's true, yeah.
I just put into the chat a few variants of semantic non-nullable list of semantic non-nullable, a non-nullable list of semantic non-nullable, and a semantically non-nullable list of non-nullable for each of those two combinations, just to see how those kind of look. And to me, I think that the tilde bang is more distinct. So that is slightly swaying me in the direction of the tilde bang, I think.
Also look at what those look like in monospace too.
Yeah, that's a very good idea.
I mean, should we also like? I mean, the asterisk option should still probably be in there to compare them all, right? Or are we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, it's just awkward typing this out into Zoom chat.
Yeah, not the best editor, I'm sure.
Everyone's using the new IDE Zoom chat. That's the AI future.
Yeah, I was gonna say I still have a slight preference on the star versus I mean the asterisk versus the caret, because of the usual meaning of an asterisk, meaning like, you know, strings attached. But it's not a strong strong thing.
The more I stare at this, the more I find myself liking the tilde bang. And not least because the tilde is almost like an S. So it's like a semantic non-null.
Just on its side. Okay, I'm tempted to say that that these are the top three for this group. I think we have a pretty good, like, I think we can all speak to the like trade-offs that and like defend the bringing down to. I think of the three, this group's preference is the tilde bang. I think that feels like at this moment, but maybe it's worth like preserving these three as like options to share with a larger group. And and maybe we can try in the notes here to capture the the concerns or benefits we see of the various options. And that feels like actually like honestly, I'm surprised we had such like in terms of bike shedding, I feel like this was actually a very productive conversation. I feel like I have a much more grounded, like, and reasoned approach to like how to evaluate these. Does that feel like sort of everyone share that same sentiment in terms of those being the clear winners and tilde bang being the sort of preferred of the three, but all three being worth preserving to share with a bigger group? Cool.
Yep.
Thank you so much to Benji for like seeding all of this and prompting it. Like, I don't think we would we would be somewhere really different without all that work. So I just really want to say thank you. And again, thanks everyone for making time to be here today.
Yeah, this has been hugely useful, I think, and lovely to get all of your input on this. And also, amazingly, we fitted it into the hour slot. Like, it seems like we've just got to the end right at the end. Perfect.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. I'll see you all in chat and around, and I'll try to fill out the comments, the notes here with our main thoughts. If there's something you want to make sure it gets captured, add it there, and then maybe we can excerpt just those last three into maybe onto Benji's RFC or something. Cool.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks for organizing this, Jordan. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye.